Caught on a private investigator's camera, he played the remorseful husband in the hotel lobby. But the moment they stepped through their front door, the mask slipped and a monster emerged. The very hands that once promised love left his wife battered, bloody, and left for dead, all before he jetted off to a holiday resort with his mistress. Was it a silent sacrifice or a cold-blooded crime? From grim hospital reports to high-stakes courtroom drama, this true story will freeze the blood in your veins. But the questions remain: why did he stage an apology only to unleash such brutality behind closed doors? How did a successful woman fall into a trap of love, risking her life and her future? Will he manage to slip through the cracks of the justice system after such a heinous crime? And where does it all end? I'm Sneha. Join me as we dive into the chilling details of this harrowing story. The rain against the double-paned glass of the suburban colonial house didn't sound like the rain in the city. In the city, rain was a percussion instrument. It drummed against the steel of skyscrapers, hissed beneath the tyres of yellow cabs on wet asphalt, and danced on the umbrellas of the rushing crowds. It was alive. It was chaotic. It was energy. But here, in the manicured silence of the cul-de-sac, the rain was a whisper. It felt heavy, muffled by the thick insulation of the walls and the sprawling, perfectly green lawn that separated her from her nearest neighbour. She stood by the bay window of the living room, a mug of chamomile tea warming her hands, looking out into the grey, wet evening. The reflection staring back at her was familiar, yet somehow foreign. The sharp, tailored blazers and the stiletto heels that used to click with authority across the marble floors of a Manhattan high-rise were gone. They were replaced by soft cashmere cardigans and practical leggings, the uniform of the suburban dream. To anyone looking in from the outside, this was paradise. It was the American dream packaged in a 4-bedroom house with a white oak door and a 2-car garage. It was the life she had been told to want, the life she had chosen. Or had she? Her mind drifted back, as it often did when the house was this quiet, to 5 years ago. She remembered the view from her corner office on the 42nd floor. She could see the veins of the city, the endless stream of lights, the pulse of the world economy moving at her command. She was a force of nature then. Top of her class at Wharton, headhunted by the biggest firms before the ink on her diploma was dry. She was the woman who walked into a boardroom full of men and commanded silence without saying a word. Her future wasn't just bright, it was blinding. Then came the love. It started like a whirlwind, the kind you read about in novels but never expect to find in the break room or at a charity gala. He was charming, not just handsome, but persuasive. He had a way of looking at her that made the chaos of her career feel like noise, and his presence feel like the only signal. You work too hard, he would whisper, pulling her away from her laptop at midnight. What's the point of conquering the world if you have no one to share it with? It was a slow erosion, a gentle, loving dismantling of her ambition. He didn't demand she quit. He simply painted a picture of a different life, a life where she wasn't constantly checking her BlackBerry, a life where success was measured in Sunday family dinners and the laughter of children, not in year-end bonuses and stock options. I want to take care of you, he had said, holding her hands in his. Let me build the world for us. You just live in it. Make it a home. It sounded so romantic then, to be cherished, to be the heart of a home rather than the brain of a corporation. So she did it. She handed in her resignation. She packed up the trophies of her corporate life, the awards, the plaques, the business cards, and placed them in a cardboard box that now sat somewhere deep in the attic, gathering dust alongside her old self. The transition to the suburbs was abrupt. The silence was the first thing she noticed. The days were long, stretching out like an endless highway with no exit. Then came the children. 2 beautiful, demanding, exhausting miracles. They became her new bosses. Her schedule, once dictated by market openings and client meetings, was now ruled by nap times, feeding schedules, and play dates. She threw herself into motherhood with the same intensity she had applied to her career. She researched the best organic foods, the best developmental toys, the best preschools. If she was going to be a homemaker, she was going to be the CEO of this household. She remembered the nights pacing the floor with a crying infant, her body aching, her mind foggy. She would look at her husband sleeping soundly in the other room because he had a big presentation in the morning. She convinced herself this was fair. This was the deal. He brought in the money. She managed the empire of the home. It was a partnership. But as the rain continued to slide down the glass, a cold draft seemed to seep through the window frame. The partnership had shifted imperceptibly at first, like the shifting of tectonic plates before a quake. After the birth of their second child, the dynamic changed. Her world had shrunk to the four walls of this house and the perimeter of the backyard. His world, however, seemed to remain vast and untouched. In fact, it was expanding. She looked at the clock on the mantle, 8:15 p.m. He wasn't home yet. Just finishing up some paperwork, the text had said. It was the same text she had received 3 times this week. She turned away from the window and walked through the living room. The house was spotless. She had spent the entire afternoon scrubbing, polishing and organising. The throw pillows were fluffed. The toys were put away in colour-coded bins. The aroma of a slow-cooked roast, now cooling in the oven, lingered in the air. It was perfect. It was a stage set waiting for the actors to arrive, but the lead actor was missing. She moved into the hallway, her socks sliding silently on the hardwood, and she paused by the mirror in the foyer. She touched her face. She was still beautiful, but there was a tiredness in her eyes that no amount of expensive eye cream could hide. It wasn't physical exhaustion. She was used to pulling all-nighters in college. This was a soul-deep fatigue. It was the exhaustion of waiting for him to come home, waiting for the kids to grow up, waiting for her real life to restart. She realised with a sudden pang of clarity that she had become a ghost in her own life. She was the invisible infrastructure that kept this family running. She made sure the bills were paid, the fridge was stocked, the clothes were clean, and the social calendar was managed. She was the oil in the machine, essential but unseen. And he was the star. When he did come home, the energy in the house would shift. But lately, that shift wasn't one of warmth. It was tension. She thought about the way he had been acting recently, the way he would come through the front door, his tie already loosened, a cloud of stress hanging over him. He would barely glance at the dinner she had spent hours preparing. He would mumble a hello to the kids, pat them on the head like one might pat a dog, and then retreat. "I need to decompress," he would say. "It's been a hell of a day." And then the sound of the door closing, the door to his study, or the door to the garage, or the door to the basement man cave he had insisted on building. She was left on the other side of that door, holding a baby on her hip, surrounded by the deafening silence of a marriage that was slowly losing its oxygen. She tried to be understanding. She told herself that the pressure on him was immense. He was the sole provider now. It was her duty to make his home a sanctuary of peace, not a place of conflict. So she swallowed her loneliness. She swallowed her desire for adult conversation. She swallowed the burning question of, what about me? But the golden cage she had built was starting to feel less like a sanctuary and more like a prison. She walked into the kitchen and poured the lukewarm tea down the sink. The liquid swirled into the drain, disappearing into the dark pipes below. She remembered a conversation from a few months ago. She had suggested tentatively that maybe she could go back to work part-time, just a consulting gig as something to get her brain firing again. He had laughed. It wasn't a mean laugh, but it was dismissive. A pat on the head. "Babe, why would you want to do that?" he had asked, pouring himself a glass of scotch. "We don't need the money. And the kids, they need their mother. Strangers raising our children, that's not who we are." That's not who we are. The phrase echoed in her mind. Who were they? They were the perfect couple on the Christmas card. He, the successful executive in the sharp suit. She, the glowing mother in the matching dress, holding their 2 perfect children. They were the envy of the neighbourhood. But perfection is a heavy burden to carry, and lately she felt her knees buckling under the weight. She walked back to the living room and sat on the plush sofa. The house was settling for the night. The creak of the floorboards upstairs, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of a car passing on the main road. She closed her eyes and listened. She was listening for the sound of his car in the driveway, the distinct purr of his luxury sedan. Every night she played this game. She would wait for the sound of tyres on gravel, then the heavy thud of the car door, then the jingle of keys, then the beep of the alarm being locked. It was a ritual, a countdown. But tonight, the silence stretched. 8:30 p.m, 8:45 p.m. Her phone lay on the coffee table, screen dark. She resisted the urge to pick it up. She didn't want to be that wife, the nagging wife, the paranoid wife. He had called her that once, jokingly, when she asked who was texting him at 11 p.m. "Don't be paranoid, honey. It's just work. Just work." She opened her eyes and looked around the room. The shadows were lengthening lengthening, stretching across the floor like dark fingers. The expensive furniture, the art on the walls, the Persian rug, it all felt cold. She realised then that she didn't own any of this. Not really. It was all provided. She was a guest in this life, a highly paid manager of a domestic corporation where she held no equity. She had traded her autonomy for security. She had traded her voice for harmony. And in the quiet of this rainy Tuesday night, a thought sparked in the back of her mind, a thought she had suppressed for months. It wasn't a suspicion yet, not fully. It was just a feeling, a vibration in the air. Why did he seem so distant, even when he was sitting right next to her? Why did his eyes gloss over when she talked about the kids? Why did he take his phone into the bathroom every single time? She shook her head, physically trying to shake the thoughts away. No, she wouldn't go there. She loved him. He loved her. This was just a phase. Every marriage had rough patches, the 7-year itch, or whatever the magazines called it. They just needed time. She stood up and walked over to the fireplace. Above the mantel hung a large portrait of them on their wedding day. She looked at her younger self. That woman in the white dress looked so hopeful, so sure. She looked at him. He looked triumphant, like he had won a prize. The rain outside began to pick up, a gentle rhythm turning into a steady drumbeat against the siding of the house. She didn't know it yet, but the storm outside was nothing compared to the one brewing inside her life. She didn't know that the silence of this house was about to be shattered. She didn't know that the man she was waiting for, the man she had built her entire world around, was already gone long before he had left the office that day. She stood there in the centre of her beautiful empty living room and waited. The golden cage was locked. The key was in his pocket, and for the first time she wondered if the safety she felt was actually just the stillness before the strike. She took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of lavender potpourri and furniture polish. She turned off the living room lamp, plunging the room into semi-darkness, illuminated only by the street lamp outside. She would wait. That was her job now, to wait, to nurture and to believe. But as the headlights of a car finally swept across the front window, illuminating the room for a brief, blinding second, she felt a shiver run down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. The car door slammed. Steps on the pavement, the key in the lock, the handle turned. Her husband was home, but the man walking through that door was not the man she married. And so the night began. The lock clicked. It was a sharp, mechanical sound that severed the quiet anticipation of the evening. The heavy oak door swung open, bringing with it a gust of damp, cool air and the scent of the outside world, rain, exhaust, and a faint, lingering trace of expensive cologne. She stood in the hallway, a forced smile plastered on her face, the baby resting on her hip. "Hi," she said softly. "You're late." He didn't look at her. Not really. His eyes swept over her, past the baby, and landed somewhere on the wall behind them. Traffic on the I-95 was a nightmare, he muttered, shrugging off his trench coat and hanging it on the rack with a weary heaviness. "And the quarterly review is coming up. The team is falling apart without me." He walked past her, loosening his tie as he went. There was no kiss, no touch on the shoulder, no cooing at the infant who watched him with wide, curious eyes. Just the brush of his suit fabric against her arm as he moved toward the kitchen. This had become the routine, the new normal. It hadn't happened overnight. It was a slow, agonising fade, like a photograph left in the sun for too long. After their first child was born, he had been different. Tired, yes, but present. They had navigated the sleepless nights together, laughing deliriously at 3 a.m. over diaper disasters. But the arrival of the second child, a sweet, quiet boy born just 14 months later, seemed to flip a switch in the household dynamic. 2 under 2. It was supposed to be chaotic but full of love. Instead, it became the catalyst for a great divide. While she drowned in a sea of breast pumps, playmats and developmental milestones, he retreated. He built walls, not out of brick and mortar, but out of silence and work. She followed him into the kitchen. He was pouring a glass of water, his back to her. The tension in his shoulders was visible, a tightness that screamed, "Do not approach." "I saved you some roast," she offered, her voice sounding thin in the large modern kitchen. It's in the warmer. I ate at the office, he said, taking a long drink, or ordered Thai with the partners. I'm just going to head downstairs. I have to prep for a conference call with the Singapore team. Downstairs. The word hung in the air like a physical barrier. The house, a sprawling suburban colonial, was designed for family living, but recently it had been partitioned into territories. The upstairs, the bedrooms, the nursery, the bath was her domain. It was soft, chaotic, filled with the scent of baby powder and laundry detergent. The basement was his. Whatever he did down there in the finished space he called his office or his man cave was a mystery wrapped in the justification of providing for the family. It started as an hour here or there to catch up on emails, but over the last 6 months it had evolved into a nightly ritual. He would come home, change out of his suit and descend into the earth, leaving her alone with the children and the silence. Okay, she said, watching him turn toward the basement door. Do you think maybe later you could help me with the boys? The oldest has been asking for you. He paused, hand on the doorknob. He didn't turn around. I'm working, honey. I'm doing this for us. You know how volatile the market is right now. If I lose my edge, we lose this house. Is that what you want? The guilt trip. It was his favourite weapon. It silenced her instantly. No, of course not, she whispered. Good night, he said. He opened the door, stepped onto the carpeted stairs and closed it behind him. She heard the distinct heavy thud of the deadbolt sliding into place. He locked it. Inside his own house, he locked the door to his family. She stood there for a long time, the hum of the refrigerator, the only company she had. The rejection stung, not like a slap, but like a deep, dull ache in her chest. It was the ache of being invisible. Later that night, after the children were finally asleep, she wandered the house like a spectre. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a heavy fog that pressed against the windows. She checked the locks on the front door. She straightened the cushions on the sofa. She folded a load of laundry. Every task was a distraction, a way to keep her mind from spiralling, but the house felt too big. It felt hollow. She found herself standing at the top of the basement stairs. She pressed her ear against the white painted wood of the door. Silence. No sound of a conference call. No typing. No voice booming in a business negotiation. Just silence. What was he doing down there? She imagined him sitting in his leather chair, staring at the wall. Was he depressed? Was he overwhelmed? She wanted to reach out, to hold him, to tell him that they didn't need the big house or the fancy cars if it meant losing him. She wanted the man back who used to dance with her in the kitchen while the pasta boiled. But the lock on the other side of the door was a clear message. Stay out. She went upstairs to their bedroom. It was a master suite that rivaled any five-star hotel. A king-sized bed with Egyptian cotton sheets, a fireplace, a walk-in closet filled with designer clothes she rarely had an occasion to wear anymore. She changed into her pyjamas and climbed into bed. The sheets were cold on his side. She lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the settling sounds of the house. 11 p.m, midnight, 1 a.m. She must have dozed off because she woke with a start when the bedroom door creaked open. The hallway light spilled in, outlining his silhouette. He moved quietly, ghost-like. He didn't turn on the lamp. He stripped off his clothes in the dark and slid into bed beside her. She lay perfectly still, feigning sleep. She felt the mattress dip under his weight. She smelled the scent of him. Soap and something else, something faint. Was it stale smoke or a different kind of perfume? No, she was imagining things. He had been in the basement. He turned his back to her immediately, pulling the duvet up to his shoulder. He was close enough to touch, yet he felt miles away. David, she whispered into the darkness, testing the waters. A pause, then a heavy sigh. I'm sleeping. Not now. I miss you, she said, her voice trembling slightly. We never talk anymore. You're always working or downstairs. Are we okay? He shifted, agitation radiating off him. You're being dramatic. I'm tired. I work 12 hours a day to pay for all of this, and all I ask for is some peace and quiet when I get home. Can you give me that? Just some peace. I didn't mean to go to sleep, he snapped. The tone was final. It was a door slamming shut. She pulled her knees to her chest, curling into a ball on her side of the vast bed. Tears pricked her eyes, hot and stinging, but she didn't let them fall. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of hearing her cry. The distance between them in that bed was no longer just physical space. It was a canyon. In the days that followed, the pattern solidified into stone. They became roommates who shared a checking account and a genetic history, but nothing else. Strangers under the same roof. Weekends were the worst. In the suburbs, weekends are for families. She would watch through the window as the neighbours across the street, the Millers, packed their SUV for a trip to the lake or work together in the garden, laughing. Meanwhile, her husband would vanish. Errands, he would say vaguely on Saturday mornings, or gulping with a client. He would leave at 9 a.m. and return at 6 p.m. smelling of fresh air and detachment, while she spent the day juggling 2 toddlers, a leaking dishwasher and a creeping sense of panic. When he was home, he was glued to his phone. It never left his hand. If he went to the bathroom, it went with him. If he took a shower, it sat on the counter face down. One Tuesday evening, she tried to bridge the gap again. She arranged a babysitter, a rare occurrence, and booked a table at their favourite Italian restaurant in the city. It was an attempt to recapture the magic, to remind him of the couple they used to be. He didn't refuse, but he didn't smile either. Fine, he said, if you think we need it. The drive to the city was excruciating. The silence in the car was thick, suffocating. She tried to make conversation about the kids, about a news article she read, about the weather. He gave one-word answers. Yeah, sure, okay. At the restaurant, amidst the candlelit ambience and the soft jazz, the reality of their situation became undeniable. They sat across from each other, but he wasn't really there. He kept glancing at his watch. He checked his phone under the table, the blue light illuminating his chin. Is everything okay at work? She asked, reaching across the table to touch his hand. He pulled his hand away, reaching for his wine glass instead. It's complicated, you wouldn't understand. The merger is entering a critical phase. Try me, she said, a flash of her old corporate self surfacing. I used to handle mergers, remember? I know the lingo. He looked at her then, really looked at her with a mixture of pity and annoyance. That was a long time ago. The game has changed. You've been out of the loop. You're in mom mode now. It's different. The insult was subtle, but it cut deep. You're not smart enough anymore. You're just a mom. I'm still the same person, she said firmly. Are you? He gestured vaguely at her outfit, a sensible dress that hid the post-pregnancy weight she was still struggling to lose. Look, let's not fight. Let's just eat and go home. I have an early start tomorrow. The rest of the meal passed in silence. She watched couples at other tables laughing, holding hands, sharing desserts. She felt like an alien observer watching a species she no longer belonged to. On the drive back to the suburbs, as the city lights faded into the rearview mirror, a cold realisation settled in her gut. This wasn't just stress. This wasn't just a phase. He was bored. He was bored with her. He was bored with the life they had built. When they got home, he didn't even wait to pay the babysitter. He went straight to the basement. I have to check the Asian markets, he said, and disappeared. She paid the girl, checked on the sleeping children, and then stood in the hallway again. The lock clicked downstairs. That sound click. It was becoming the soundtrack of her life. She walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water, her mind racing. Why the basement? Why the locks? Why the phone that never left his sight? She sat at the kitchen island staring at the baby monitor. The screen showed her children sleeping peacefully in black and white night vision. They were safe. They were loved by her. But what about him? For the first time, she allowed herself to think the unthinkable. It wasn't just that he was distant. It was that he was hiding something. You don't lock doors in your own home unless you have something to protect or something to conceal. She remembered the way he had pulled his hand away at dinner. It wasn't just annoyance, it was recoil, as if her touch was unwanted, as if his skin belonged to someone else. No, she shook her head. Don't be paranoid. He was a good man. He was a provider. He was just stressed. But as she sat there in the dark kitchen, the silence of the suburban night pressing against the windows, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was living with a stranger who wore her husband's face, drove her husband's car, but whose heart had vacated the premises long ago. She looked at the door to the basement one last time. A thin strip of light was visible under the crack. He wasn't working. She knew it in her bones. He was escaping, and she was beginning to realise that she was the one being left behind in the wreckage of a life that looked perfect onto the outside but was rotting from the inside out. The stranger downstairs clicked something on a keyboard. A faint, muffled laugh echoed up the ventilation shaft. It wasn't a business laugh. It was a soft, intimate laugh, and in the silence of the hallway, that laugh sounded like a gunshot. The laugh from the basement didn't leave her. It echoed in the corridors of her mind for days, a phantom sound that seemed to mock the silence of the house. It wasn't the boisterous laugh of a man watching a comedy special or the polite chuckle of a business call. It was soft. It was guarded. It was the kind of laugh you share with someone who knows your secrets. The next morning, the sun rose over the manicured lawns of the neighbourhood, casting long, sharp shadows shadows across the kitchen floor. The world outside looked crisp and orderly, but inside the air felt thick with unsaid words. She stood by the kitchen island buttering toast for the boys. Her movements were mechanical. Her eyes, however, were fixed on the granite countertop where his phone lay face down. It was a sleek, black object, a portal to a world she was no longer invited to. He walked in, freshly showered, smelling of a new cologne. That was another thing, the cologne. For years, he had worn the same musk she bought him for Christmas. Now he smelled like sea salt and citrus, a younger scent. A scent for someone trying to impress. Morning, he said, breezing past her to grab a travel mug of coffee. He didn't kiss her cheek. He didn't even look at the toast. You're wearing the new shirt, she noted, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. The blue one. He glanced down at his chest, adjusting his cufflinks. Yeah. Big meeting today. Perception is reality, right? He reached for the phone. His hand moved with the speed of a striking cobra. He slid it into his pocket before she could even glance at the screen. Who were you talking to last night? She asked. The question slipped out before she could stop it. He paused, his back to her. The tension in the room spiked. Last night, in the basement, late. I heard you laughing. He turned slowly, a look of genuine confusion on his face. Or was it a performance? It was hard to tell anymore. Laughing? Honey, I was on a conference call with the Tokyo team until 2 a.m. I was probably delirious, or maybe you were dreaming. You've been tired lately. Maybe you were dreaming. There it was, the seed of doubt planted with a smile. I wasn't sleeping, she said, gripping the edge of the counter. I was awake. It sounded personal. He chuckled, shaking his head as if she had told a cute but silly joke. Personal, I wish. It was a nightmare of spreadsheets and compliance issues. You're letting your imagination run wild again. It's probably the stress of the kids. Have you been taking your vitamins? He walked over and patted her shoulder. It was a patronising touch, the kind a doctor gives a confused patient. Don't overthink things. It makes you look frantic. With that, he was gone. The garage door rumbled, the car reversed, and she was left alone with the toast and the silence. For the next few weeks, the house became a theatre of psychological warfare. She began to notice things, small things, inconsistencies in the narrative of their lives. One evening, while doing laundry, she found a receipt in the pocket of his dress pants. It was for a dinner at a steakhouse in the city. 2 entrees, a bottle of expensive Pinot Noir. The date was last Friday. He had told her he was working late at the office and ordered pizza at his desk. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She held the receipt like it was a smoking gun. This was it. Proof. She waited until the kids were asleep. She sat in the living room, the receipt on the coffee table, waiting for the sound of his key in the lock. When he finally came home looking dishevelled and exhausted, she didn't waste time. You said you worked late on Friday, she said, her voice tight. I did, he replied, dropping his briefcase. What is this? An interrogation? I found this. She pointed to the receipt. Steakhouse, 2 people, Friday night, 8:30 p.m. You said you were at your desk. He looked at the receipt and then at her. He didn't flinch. He didn't panic. Instead, his face hardened into a mask of disappointment. Oh, for God's sake, he sighed, rubbing his temples. Are you going through my pockets now? Is that what we've come to? Answer the question, she demanded, standing up. It was a client dinner, he said smoothly. Johnston from the acquisition team. I had to wine and dine him to close the deal. I told you that. No, she shook her head, tears of frustration welling up. No, you didn't. You said you ordered pizza. You said you were alone. He stepped closer, invading her personal space. His eyes were cold. I said I was working. Dinner with a client is work. Why are you twisting my words? You always do this. You take something innocent and twist it into some grand conspiracy. I'm not twisting anything. You lied. I didn't lie, he shouted, his voice booming off the walls. I spared you the boring details of my job, details you used to understand, but now you just sit here in this house, obsessing over receipts, looking for drama because your own life is so small. The words hit her like a physical blow. Your own life is so small. That's not fair, she whispered. I gave up my life for this family, for you. And you never let me forget it, he shot back. Look at you. You're trembling. You're hysterical. This isn't healthy. Maybe you need to see someone, a therapist. My mother always said you were a bit fragile. He walked past her, heading for the stairs. I'm going to bed. I worked too hard to come home to this insanity. She stood there shaking. And was he right? Did she misremember? Had he mentioned a client dinner? Her memory felt foggy lately. The days blurred together. Diapers, cartoons, groceries, cleaning. Maybe she had forgotten. Maybe she was being paranoid. This was the gaslight effect, it wasn't just lying. It was the systematic dismantling of her reality. He made her question her memory, her perception, and her sanity. Over the next month, the distance grew into a chasm. He started locking his phone with a new passcode. When she asked for it, claiming she needed to check a calendar date, he refused. It's company policy, he said. Security breach risks, you can't access it anymore. But it's your personal phone too, she argued, and not anymore, he said. It's all merged. Stop asking. He began taking his phone into the bathroom for 45 minutes at a time. The shower would run, but she wouldn't hear the water hitting a body, just the hiss of the spray and the silence. One night she stood outside the bathroom door. She pressed her ear against the wood, holding her breath. She heard typing, the rapid rhythmic tap, tap, tap of text messaging, then a soft, low voice. I know, soon, I promise. Her blood ran cold. Soon. She knocked on the door, her fist pounding against the wood. Who are you talking to? The water turned off instantly. A moment later, the door flew open. He stood there, a towel wrapped around his waist, steam billowing out behind him. He looked furious. What is wrong with you? He hissed. I heard you, she cried. You said soon. Who were you talking to? He stared at her, his eyes wide with incredulity. I was listening to a podcast, a business podcast. Are you out of your mind? You're spying on me in the shower now. It didn't sound like a podcast. Because you hear what you want to hear. He grabbed her shoulders, his grip tight, almost painful. You are losing it. You are becoming toxic. Do you realise that? You are poisoning this house with your jealousy and your insecurity. He pushed past her and stormed into the bedroom. I'm sleeping in the guest room. I can't be around this negative energy. She was left standing in the hallway, the damp air from the bathroom clinging to her skin. She felt dizzy. She felt crazy. Maybe he was right. Maybe she was projecting her own unhappiness onto him. Maybe she was the villain in this story, the nagging, suspicious wife who couldn't appreciate her hard-working husband. She went into the nursery and sat in the rocking chair watching her youngest son sleep. The rhythm of his breathing was the only thing that tethered her to reality. I am not crazy, she whispered to the darkness. I am not crazy. But the doubt was a vine wrapping itself around her throat. A few days later, the breaking point arrived not with a shout but with a whisper. He had left for work early, leaving his laptop bag on the bench by the front door. He had forgotten it, a rare mistake for a man so meticulous. She stared at the leather bag. It was forbidden territory, but the need to know, the need to stop, the spinning in her head was too strong. She unzipped the bag. Inside, amidst the files and the sleek laptop, was a small velvet pouch, and it looked like jewellery packaging. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a charm, a heart. Relief washed over her. It was for her. It must be. Their anniversary was coming up in 3 weeks. He had bought her a gift. He did care. All the secrecy, the sneaking around. Maybe he was just planning a surprise. She felt a wave of shame. He was right. She was paranoid. She was ruining everything. She quickly put the pouch back, zipped the bag, and stepped away. When he called 10 minutes later, panicked, asking if his bag was there, she sounded cheerful. Yes, honey, it's right here. I'll bring it to you. No, he shouted too quickly. I mean, no, don't bother. I'll send my assistant to pick it up. Don't touch it. Don't open it. There are confidential files. I didn't touch it, she lied, smiling. I love you. Yeah, thanks. He hung up. She spent the rest of the day floating on a cloud of relief. She cooked his favourite meal. She put on a nice dress. She waited for him to come home, expecting the tension to break, expecting him to present the bracelet eventually. 3 weeks passed. The anniversary dinner came and went. He gave her a gift card to a spa. So you can relax, he said. You've been so stressed. She stared at the gift card. Is this it? What do you mean? He asked, sipping his wine. It's a full day package. It cost a fortune. The bracelet, she whispered. Where is the silver bracelet? He froze. The fork halfway to his mouth stopped. For a split second, the mask slipped. Panic flitted across his eyes. What bracelet? The one in your bag. 3 weeks ago. The heart charm. He set the fork down. He took a deep breath, and then the gaslighting resumed, colder and sharper than ever. I have no idea what you're talking about. There was no bracelet. You must have hallucinated it, or maybe you dreamt it. You really need to see a doctor, honey. You're seeing things that aren't there. He looked at her with such conviction, such pity, that for a second she believed him. Maybe she had imagined it. Maybe the velvet pouch was a phantom. But then she looked at his hand. He was gripping the stem of the wine glass so hard his knuckles were white. He was lying. And in that moment, the fog lifted. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't paranoid. She wasn't fragile. She was being played. The man sitting across from her wasn't her partner. He was an adversary. He was gaslighting her to cover his tracks, using her love and her trust as weapons against her. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the cruelty behind his eyes. He would never admit it. He would drive her to the brink of insanity before he admitted the truth. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply nodded, taking a bite of her salad. You're right, she said softly. Maybe I am seeing things. I should get some help. He relaxed. He smiled, a victorious, smug smile. I'm glad you agree. I just want what's best for you, best for me. She finished her dinner, played her part and went to bed early, but she didn't sleep. Lying in the dark, listening to his breathing, she made a decision. He thought he had won. He thought he had broken her spirit, but he had made a fatal mistake. He had underestimated the woman who once commanded boardrooms. He had forgotten that she knew how to analyse data, how to find the cracks in a story, how to build a case. If he wouldn't give her the truth, she would take it. She wouldn't ask him again. She wouldn't beg. She was done talking. Tomorrow, she would make a phone call, not to a therapist, but to a professional who dealt in facts, not feelings. The gaslighting was over. The investigation was about to begin. The business card was heavy, a thick cream stock with embossed black lettering. No logo, no catchy slogan. Just a name, Sterling Associates, and a phone number. It didn't look like the kind of card you'd find pinned to a corkboard at a laundromat. It looked like the kind of card that was slid across mahogany desks in high-rise offices, meant for problems that money could solve, but polite society refused to discuss. She sat in her car parked 2 blocks away from her own house, the engine idling. The rain had returned, a relentless drizzle that blurred the suburban world outside into a watercolour of greys and greens. She dialed the number. Sterling, a voice answered. It was deep, calm, and utterly professional. It sounded less like a private eye and more like a tax attorney. I need to hire you, she said. Her voice didn't shake. The trembling had stopped the moment she realised the bracelet wasn't a hallucination. I need to know where my husband goes when he isn't home. The process was clinically efficient and there were no dark alley meetings. She met the lead investigator, a man named Miller, at a bustling coffee shop in the city the next day. He was nondescript, average height, average build, wearing a beige windbreaker that made him invisible in a crowd. He looked like a dad waiting for a soccer game to start, and that was his superpower. We'll need his license plate, his typical schedule, and a recent photo, Miller said, opening a small notebook. Does he use a toll pass? Does he have a company vehicle? She provided everything. She gave them the access codes she knew, the names of his colleagues, the make and model of his car. It felt strange handing over the data of their shared life to a stranger. It felt like a betrayal. But then she remembered the laugh from the basement. She remembered the empty velvet pouch. She remembered the way he looked at her like she was a broken appliance he couldn't be bothered to fix. We start tonight, Miller said. Go home, act normal, do not change your routine. If he senses you're suspicious, he'll go to ground. We need him comfortable, act normal. It was the hardest performance of her life. That evening, her husband came home with the same tired sighs, the same loosened tie, the same complaints about the market volatility. She listened, she nodded, she reheated his dinner, she poured his wine. Inside, she was screaming, but on the outside, she was the dutiful wife. She watched him eat, dissecting his every movement. Was he texting under the table? Was he thinking about her? You're staring, he said, glancing up from his plate. Just thinking. She smiled, a thin porcelain smile. You look tired. Maybe you should go relax downstairs after dinner. He blinked, surprised by her acquiescence. Usually she begged him to stay upstairs. Yeah, he said, relief washing over his face. Yeah, I think I will. He didn't know that the relaxing he was about to do was no longer a secret. 3 days passed. The waiting was agony. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart jumped into her throat. She imagined the investigators sitting in a sedan somewhere, drinking lukewarm coffee, watching the man she had promised to love forever betray her in high definition. On the 4th day, a Thursday, the call came. She was folding laundry in the bedroom, the baby playing on the rug beside her. The phone screen lit up. Sterling. She picked it up on the first ring. We have something, Miller said. His voice was devoid of emotion. He left the office at 5:15 p.m. He didn't take his usual route home. He headed north towards the highway. Where is he now? She asked, clutching a tiny pair of socks. He's at a hotel, the Grandview, on the outskirts of the city. It's a boutique place. Discreet. The Grandview. She knew it. It was where they had attended a wedding reception 2 years ago. It was elegant, expensive, and romantic. The kind of place you go to celebrate love. Is he alone? No, Miller said. He met a woman in the lobby. Blonde, mid-20s, professional attire. They checked in 10 minutes ago. We have them on video entering the elevator together. Pierre left the room. It was one thing to suspect it. It was another to hear it narrated like a traffic report. Who is she? She whispered. We ran the plates on her car. Her name is Jessica Thorne. She works at his firm. She's an associate in the marketing department. The marketing associate, the one he had mentioned months ago in passing. Just a kid, really, bright, but needs a lot of mentoring. Do you want us to intervene? Miller asked, or do you want the documentation first? I want to see, she said. A cold fury was rising in her, displacing the grief. I want to see them. We are sending you the preliminary shots now. Secure line. Her phone pinged. She opened the message. The photos were high resolution, taken with a telephoto lens. Photo 1, her husband's car pulling up to the valet. Photo 2, him standing in the lobby checking his watch. He looked excited. He was smiling. A genuine broad smile she hadn't seen in years. Photo 3, the woman entering the frame. She was young, beautiful in a sharp, modern way. Photo 4, the greeting. It wasn't a handshake. It wasn't a friendly hug. His hand was on the small of her back, pulling her close. Her hand was resting on his chest. And there, on her wrist, glinting under the hotel chandelier's light, was the silver bracelet with the heart charm. The breath caught in her throat, the physical proof of his gaslighting. He had looked her in the eye and told her she was crazy. He had told her she needed a doctor. He had let her believe her mind was breaking, all while she was wearing the evidence. Mrs. Reynolds? Miller's voice came back on the line. Are you there? I'm here, she said. Her voice sounded strange to her ears, hard, flinty. I'm coming there. Ma'am, I wouldn't advise a confrontation without... I'm coming, she interrupted. Keep eyes on the room. Don't let them leave. She hung up. She called her mother, who lived 20 minutes away. Mum, I need you to come watch the boys. It's an emergency. No, everyone is fine. I have to handle something, please. Her mother, sensing the steel in her daughter's voice, didn't argue. When her mother arrived, she didn't offer explanations. She simply grabbed her keys and walked out the door. The drive to the Grandview took 40 minutes. It felt like 40 seconds. The road passed in a blur of red taillights and white headlights. She didn't listen to music. She didn't cry. She drove with the precision of a surgeon preparing for an operation. She pulled into the hotel parking lot. A black sedan flashed its lights once. Miller stepped out. He walked over to her car as she rolled down the window. They haven't moved. Room 314, third floor, ocean view. Thank you, she said. Ma'am, Miller leaned in. We have the evidence. You have enough for a divorce. You have enough to destroy him in court. You don't need to go up there. She looked at the hotel entrance and the revolving glass doors spinning slowly. Yes, I do. He made me question my sanity, Mr. Miller. He made me think I was losing my mind. I need him to see that I'm not crazy. I need to see the look on his face when the lie D's. Miller nodded slowly. He understood. I'll be right behind you, just in case. She walked into the lobby. It smelled of lilies and expensive floor wax. The receptionist smiled at her, unaware that she was walking into a disaster zone. She took the elevator to the third floor. The hallway was quiet, lined with thick patterned carpet that swallowed the sound of her footsteps. Room 314. She stood in front of the door. She could hear faint sounds from inside, the murmur of a TV, the clink of glass. Laughter. That laugh, the soft, intimate laugh she had heard from the basement. She didn't knock. She didn't hesitate. She knew he often left doors unlocked when he felt safe, when he felt arrogant, but just in case she had a plan. She raised her hand and pounded on the door. Housekeeping, she called out, disguising her voice. A pause, then the sound of footsteps. We didn't order anything. Her husband's voice came through the wood. Complimentary champagne, sir, she said. The lock clicked. The handle turned. The door opened. He was wearing a hotel robe, his hair wet, a glass of wine in his hand. He looked relaxed, happy, the master of his universe. Just leave it on the... He stopped. The glass of wine slipped from his fingers. It hit the floor with a shatter that seemed to echo through the entire hotel. Red wine splashed across his bare feet and the pristine white carpet, looking for all the world like blood. His face went pale. All the colour, all the arrogance drained out of him in a single second. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Behind him, sitting on the edge of the bed in a matching robe, was the girl, Jessica. She looked up, confused, smiling uncertainly. Then she saw the woman in the doorway. She saw the resemblance to the photos on his desk, and the smile vanished. Honey? Jessica asked, her voice trembling. The husband, David, stumbled back. He looked like he had seen a ghost, and in a way he had. He was looking at the ghost of the woman he thought he had buried under piles of laundry and gaslighting, but she wasn't a ghost anymore. She stepped into the room. She stepped over the broken glass. "Hello, David," she said. Her voice was terrifyingly calm. "I believe that bracelet belongs to me." He backed away until he hit the dresser. "Babe, wait, I can explain. This isn't what it looks like." "It looks like adultery," she said, pulling out her phone and snapping a photo of the scene. Him in the robe, the mistress on the bed, the broken wine. "It looks like you're not working late, and it looks like I'm not paranoid after all." The mistress scrambled off the bed, grabbing her clothes, trying to hide behind the bathroom door. "I didn't know," she stammered. "He told me you were separated. He said you lived in different parts of the house." "We do," she said, her eyes never leaving her husband. "He lives in the basement. I live in reality." Miller appeared in the doorway behind her, his camera clicking rapidly, capturing the chaos, the fear, the undeniable truth. David looked from his wife to the investigator, and the realization hit him. The trap hadn't just sprung, it had crushed him. "Please," he whispered, his hands shaking as he reached out. "Don't do this here. Not here. Think about the kids." "The kids?" She laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You haven't thought about the kids in 2 years, David. You've been too busy mentoring." She turned to leave. She had seen what she needed to see. The monster wasn't a nightmare. He was just a pathetic man in a hotel robe, caught in a lie. "We're going home," she said over her shoulder. "You have 1 hour to pack your things and get out of my house. If you're not gone by the time I get back, I'm posting these photos on every social media platform you and your company use." "No, wait!" He lunged forward, grabbing her arm. "You can't leave. We have to talk. I'll fix this." She pulled her arm away with a force that surprised even her. "Don't touch me. You lost that right the moment you gave her my bracelet." She walked out of the room, down the silent hallway and back to the elevator. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. She had the photos. She had the truth. The gaslighting was over. But as the elevator doors closed, shutting out the sight of room 314, she didn't feel triumph. She felt a cold dread because she knew him. She knew the desperation in his eyes. He wasn't sorry he did it. He was sorry he got caught. And a man like David, a man who builds his life on control and image, does not handle losing control well. She walked to her car, the rain still falling. She thought the worst was over. She thought the confrontation was the climax. She was wrong. The exposure hadn't stopped the danger. It had only uncaged it. The heavy glass doors of the Grandview Hotel spun shut behind her, but they couldn't cut off the sound of his voice. He was running now. The man who, moments ago, had stood in a plush robe like a king holding court was now sprinting across the wet asphalt of the parking lot, heedless of the puddles ruining his Italian leather loafers. "Wait, just wait!" She fumbled with her keys. Her hands, which had been steady as a surgeon's while she took the photos, were now shaking violently. The adrenaline dump was hitting her. Her body was reacting to the trauma her mind had just processed. She unlocked her SUV and threw herself into the driver's seat. She slammed the door and hit the lock button just as his face appeared in the window. He looked manic. The rain plastered his hair to his forehead. His eyes were wide, rimmed with red, not from tears, but from the sheer panic of a man watching his carefully constructed life incinerate in real time. He banged on the glass with the flat of his palm. It was a dull, thumping sound that synchronized with the frantic beating of her heart. "Open the door!" he shouted, his voice muffled by the safety glass. "Please, you can't just drive off. We have to talk." She stared at him for the first time in 5 years. She wasn't looking at her husband. She wasn't looking at the father of her children. She was looking at a desperate stranger. The charm was gone. The authority was gone. All that was left was fear. She put the key in the ignition and turned it. The engine roared to life. "I'm going home," she said, though he couldn't hear her. "I'm going to get my children." She shifted into reverse. He didn't move. He stood right by the fender, blocking her exit. He held his hands up in a surrender pose, palms open. "I'm sorry," he screamed through the rain. "I'm sorry, okay? It was a mistake, a stupid, meaningless mistake. Don't throw everything away for this." Meaningless. The word tasted like bile in her throat. The bracelet wasn't meaningless. The months of lies weren't meaningless. The way he had made her feel insane for suspecting the truth, that was calculated cruelty. She honked the horn, a long, sharp blast that cut through the night. He flipped flinched, jumping back just enough for her to swing the car around. She didn't look back. She peeled out of the parking lot, the tyres screeching on the wet pavement, leaving him standing there in the rain, a pathetic figure in a soaked dress shirt and trousers he had hastily pulled on. The drive home was a blur of highway lights and internal screaming. She kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see his headlights bearing down on her, but the road behind her was empty. Her phone began to ring. It connected to the car's Bluetooth automatically. His name flashed on the dashboard screen. David. She let it ring. It stopped. Then it started again immediately. She hit the decline button. Then the text messages started coming in. The notification sound pinged rhythmically like a countdown. Pick up the phone. Please, baby, let me explain. She meant nothing to me. I love you. Only you. I'm coming home. Don't do anything crazy. Crazy. He was still using that word. Even now, begging for his life, he couldn't help but paint her as the unstable one. She reached the suburbs. The transition from the highway to the quiet tree-lined streets of their neighbourhood usually brought her a sense of peace. Tonight, it felt like driving into a trap. The houses, dark and silent, felt indifferent. She pulled into the driveway. The house was glowing warm and yellow against the night. Her mother's car was in the driveway. A pang of guilt hit her. She had dragged her mother into this. She had dragged everyone into this. She walked into the house, shaking the rain off her coat. The living room was peaceful. Her mother was on the sofa reading a book. You're back early, her mother said, looking up over her reading glasses. Then she saw her daughter's face. The pale skin, the dilated pupils, the way she was holding herself together by a thread. Honey, what happened? I found him, she said. Her voice was flat. I need you to take the boys for the night. Please, Mom, just take them to your place. Her mother stood up slowly, closing the book. She didn't ask for details. She knew a crisis when she saw one. Okay, I'll get the car seat. They're both asleep. We can transfer them without waking them up. As they were carefully buckling the sleeping children into her mother's car, headlights swept across the lawn. He was here. David's car screeched into the driveway, blocking her mother in. He jumped out, not even closing his door. He looked wild. His shirt was untucked, his tie gone. Where are you taking them? He demanded, rushing toward the grandmother's car. Her mother stepped in front of him. She was a small woman, but she had the ferocity of a matriarch protecting her own. David, step back! You smell like a distillery. I had 2 glasses of wine, he shouted, running a hand through his wet hair. This is my house. These are my kids. You can't just take them. David, she stepped forward, her voice cutting through his panic. Let them go. If you wake them up, if you scare them, I swear to God, I will call the police right now and show them the photos on my phone. Do you want that? Do you want to be arrested for public disturbance in front of the neighbours? He froze. The threat of public humiliation was the only thing that could penetrate his hysteria. He looked at the neighbours' houses, dark judging windows, and he looked at his mother-in-law, whose face was stone cold. Fine, he hissed. Fine, let them go. We need to talk alone anyway. He moved his car to let her mother pass. As the taillights of her mother's car disappeared down the street, a heavy silence descended on the driveway. It was just the 2 of them now. Inside, he said. It wasn't a command, it was a plea. Please, it's freezing out here. She walked into the house, leaving the front door unlocked. She walked straight to the kitchen island, her command centre, and stood there, putting the granite countertop between them. He followed her in. He closed the front door. The click of the latch sounded final. He walked into the kitchen and stopped. He didn't come close. He slumped against the refrigerator, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor, his head in his hands. This was the performance. The masquerade. I ruined everything, he sobbed. It was a guttural, wet sound. I am so stupid. I am so stupid. She watched him. A part of her, the part that had loved him for 7 years, wanted to go to him, wanted to comfort him. That was her programming. Fix it. Make it better. But the image of the hotel room was burned into her retinas. Stop it, David, she said. Get up. He looked up. His face was wet with tears. I was weak, he said, his voice trembling. It's the pressure, the job, the mortgage, keeping up this lifestyle. I felt like I was drowning. And she was just there. She listened. It wasn't love, Sarah. It was an escape. A drug. So you drugged yourself with another woman, she said coldly, and you paid for it with our bank account, and you hid it with lies about my sanity. He crawled forward on his knees. It was a pathetic sight. The high-powered executive, the man who commanded respect, crawling on the kitchen tiles. I No, he wept. I was wrong to say those things. I was trying to protect you. I didn't want you to be hurt. Protect me? She laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. You told me I needed a psychiatrist because I found a receipt. You made me doubt my own mind to protect yourself. He reached out, trying to grab the hem of her pants. She stepped back. I can fix this, he begged. I'll fire her. I'll quit the firm. We can move. We can start over. Just don't leave me. I can't do this without you. You're my rock. You're everything. He was saying all the right things. He was pushing every button he had installed in her over the years. He was appealing to her loyalty, her compassion, her desire for a complete family. I'm willing to go to therapy, he continued, the words tumbling out fast. Couples counselling, whatever you want. I'll sign a post-nup. I'll give you everything. Just please don't file. Don't tell people. We can handle this internally. Don't tell people. There it was. The truth underneath the tears. He wasn't crying because he broke her heart. He was crying because he was terrified of the scandal. It's too late, she said softly. He stopped crying. The switch was almost instantaneous. He wiped his face with the back of his hand and looked up at her. The sorrow was evaporating, replaced by a calculating glimmer. What do you mean it's too late? I spoke to a lawyer yesterday, she lied. She hadn't, but she wanted to see his reaction. I have the evidence. The photos Miller took tonight are already uploaded to a cloud server he controls. If anything happens to me or if you try to take the kids, they go public. He stood up slowly. The slump in his shoulders vanished. He seemed to grow taller, filling the space in the kitchen. You hired a PI, he said. His voice was no longer shaky. It was level, controlled. Miller, that hack? He got the job done, she said, crossing her arms to hide the trembling in her chest. Unlike you. His eyes narrowed. The mask of the repentant husband was slipping. The masquerade was ending. You think you're so smart, he muttered, pacing a small circle in the kitchen. You think you have it all figured out? You think you can just blow up my life and walk away with half? I built this life too, David. I sacrificed my career so you could have yours. Half is generous. He stopped pacing. He looked at the knife block on the counter. Then he looked at the sliding glass door that led to the backyard. Then he looked at the door to the basement. You don't understand, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. I can't let this get out. The merger is next week. If there's a scandal, if there's a messy divorce, I lose my equity. I lose the bonus. I lose everything. You should have thought about that before you booked room 314, she said. He looked at her with an expression she had never seen before. It wasn't anger. It was emptiness, a void where empathy should be. You're right, he said. He smiled. It was a disconnected, chilling smile. I should have been more careful, but you should have been more loyal. Loyal, she stared at him. I gave you everything. You gave me boredom, he snapped, the veneer finally cracking completely. You gave me domestic drudgery. You became a maid, Sarah, a boring, nagging maid. Jessica, she sees me as a man. You see me as a paycheck and a chore. The cruelty of his words took her breath away, but strangely, it also liberated her. There was no love left here to save. Get out, she said, pointing to the door. Get your things and get out. Go to a hotel. I don't care where you go, but you are not sleeping here tonight. He stared at her for a long moment. He seemed to be weighing his options, assessing the threat level. Okay, he said, holding up his hands. Okay, you win. I'll go. I need to get some things from the basement. My laptop, my files, I can't work without them. Fine, she said. Get them and go. You have 10 minutes. He turned and walked toward the basement door. He opened it and the familiar scent of cool, damp air wafted up. He paused on the top step and looked back at her. The light from the hallway cast half his face in shadow. You know, he said softly, I really did love you once. Before you became this. He descended the stairs. She heard his heavy footsteps on the wooden treads. She stood in the kitchen, checking her watch. 1 minute passed. 2. She should have felt relief. He was leaving. She had won the standoff. But the silence from the basement felt different tonight. Usually it was the silence of withdrawal. Tonight it felt like the silence of preparation. She heard a drawer open downstairs, then the sound of metal clinking against metal. Why was he opening drawers? His laptop was always on the desk. A cold prickle of instinct ran down the back of her neck. It was the same instinct that had told her to check his bag. The same instinct that told her he was lying about the laughing. Get out of the house, a voice in her head screamed. Get out now! She took a step toward the front door. Sarah! His voice called up from the basement. It sounded strange, strained. Sarah, can you come here? I can't find the external hard drive, the one with the kids' photos. I want to take a copy. The kids' photos. The bait. I don't know where it is, she called back, her hand reaching for the doorknob. Please, he said. It's all I'm asking for. Just help me find it and I'm gone, I promise. She hesitated. If she went down down there, she could find it in 2 seconds, hand it to him, and end this nightmare. If she refused, he might come up and argue for another hour. She just wanted him gone. She made the mistake because she took her hand off the front doorknob. She walked toward the basement door. "Hurry up, David," she said, stepping onto the landing. She walked down the stairs. The basement was dimly lit. The only light came from the lamp on his desk in the far corner. He was standing there, his back to her. He wasn't looking for a hard drive. He was just standing there, staring at the wall. "David?" He turned around slowly. He wasn't holding a hard drive. He wasn't holding his laptop. He was holding a heavy metal golf club, a driver. He gripped it with both hands, his knuckles white, and the mask was gone. The masquerade was over. The man looking at her wasn't her husband. He wasn't even the cheater from the hotel. He was a stranger with nothing left to lose. "I can't let you ruin me, Sarah," he whispered, and then he swung. The sound was not a crack. It was a dull, sickening thud. The golf club didn't connect with her head. She had flinched just in time, but it slammed into her shoulder with the force of a freight train. The impact sent a shockwave of white-hot agony down her arm and across her chest. The bone snapped. She heard it before she felt it. She hit the concrete floor hard. The breath was knocked out of her lungs, leaving her gasping. A fish out of water, staring up at the exposed wooden beams of the basement ceiling. Dust motes danced in the light of the single desk lamp, swirling, undisturbed, indifferent to the violence erupting below. "You made me do this," David panted. His voice was unrecognisable. It was high, thin, vibrating with a terrifying mixture of rage and panic. "I told you to let it go. I told you." She tried to scramble backward, her heels scraping against the cold cement, but her left arm was useless, a dead weight of screaming nerves. She looked up at him. He was silhouetted against the light. The golf club raced again. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like David. He was wearing the car keys she had ironed. He was wearing the watch she had given him for his birthday. That was the horror of it, the familiarity of the hand that was trying to end her. "David, stop," she wheezed, the taste of copper filling her mouth. "Please!" He didn't stop. He swung again. This time the club struck her ribs. The pain was blinding. A supernova behind her eyelids. She curled into a ball, instinctively protecting her head, protecting the core of who she was. She didn't scream. She couldn't. The air was gone. He hit her again and again. It wasn't a fight. It was an execution. He was grunting with every blow, venting years of his own perceived inadequacies, his own failures, his own selfishness onto her body. Every strike was a rejection of the life she had built for him. Whack. That was for the mortgage. Whack. That was for the babies crying at night. Whack. That was for the look in her eyes when she found the receipt. Finally, he stopped. Silence rushed back into the basement, heavy and suffocating. The only sound was his ragged breathing and the low hum of the furnace in the corner. She lay still, perfectly still. Her body felt broken, disconnected, as if she were floating above the concrete floor. She knew with a primal animal instinct that if she moved, if she made a sound, he would finish it. She had to be dead, or close enough to it that he would stop. He stood over her for a long moment. She could feel his gaze burning into her back. She focused on shallow, tiny breaths, willing her heart to slow down, willing herself to become invisible. "God," he whispered. "Oh God." The club clattered to the floor. It rolled, the metal shaft ringing against the concrete. He wasn't checking for a pulse. He wasn't calling 911. He was pacing. "I have to go," he muttered to himself. I have to establish an alibi. I was never here. I was at the hotel. I was driving." He stepped over her. He literally stepped over the mother of his children, as if she were a pile of laundry he had dropped. She heard him running up the stairs. The heavy footsteps crossed the kitchen floor. Then the sound of water running in the sink. He was washing his hands. He was washing her off his skin. Then the beep of the security system being disarmed. The front door opened and closed. The car engine roared to life in the driveway. Tires squealed against the asphalt, and then the sound faded into the distance. He was gone. She was alone in the dark, in the basement, broken. For a long time, she didn't move. The pain was a living thing now, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. Every nerve ending was firing a warning signal. Do not move. Stay down. But then A thought pierced through the fog of pain. The boys, they were with her mother. They were safe. But if she died here, if she bled out on this cold floor, David would get them. He would spin a story. He would say she fell. He would say she was unstable. He would take them. He would raise them with that same cold, narcissistic detachment. He would bring her, the mistress, into their lives. No, the word didn't leave her lips, but it roared in her mind. She opened her eyes. The basement was spinning. She dug her good hand into the concrete, her fingernails scraping against the grit. She pulled. Her body screamed in protest. Her ribs felt like jagged glass grinding together, but she pulled again. She crawled. Inch by agonising inch. She was a soldier on a battlefield of one. She reached the stairs. They looked like a mountain, a wooden Everest. She reached up and grabbed the first step. She hauled herself up. Her broken arm dragged uselessly at her side, bumping against the wood, sending fresh spikes of nausea through her system. 1, she gasped, sweat stinging her eyes. 2, she remembered the day she gave birth to her first son. The pain then had been productive. It had a purpose. This pain was destructive. It was pure malice, but she would use it. She would turn it into fuel. 3, she slipped. Her chin hit the wood hard. She stifled a cry. Don't pass out. If you pass out, you die. 4, 5, 6. Time lost its meaning. It could have been minutes. It could have been hours. She was just a creature of will, clawing her way out of the underworld. Finally, she reached the top. She collapsed onto the kitchen floor, the cool tiles feeling like heaven against her feverish cheek. The house was dark. The front door, he had closed it, but had he locked it? She dragged herself across the kitchen, past the island where they used to eat breakfast, past the spot where he had knelt and begged for forgiveness just an hour ago. She reached the hallway, the foyer, the door. She reached up, her hands shaking violently, and turned the handle. It opened. The cool night air hit her face. It smelled of rain and wet grass. It smelled of life. She stumbled out onto the porch. Her legs refused to hold her. She collapsed onto the welcome mat, knocking over a potted plant. The ceramic pot shattered. She looked out at the street. It was quiet, the suburban idyll. Blue flickering lights from a TV screen danced in the window of the house across the street. The Millers. She tried to yell, but her voice was a broken rasp. Help! It was no louder than a whisper. She tried again, drawing air into her bruised lungs. Help me! Nothing happened. The street remained silent. She saw the headlights of a car turning onto the street. A neighbour coming home late. A delivery driver. She waved her good arm. She tried to lift her head. The car drove past. They didn't see the broken woman lying in the shadows of her own porch. She needed to get to the light, the motion sensor light on the garage. If she could trigger it, maybe someone would see. She rolled off the porch, hitting the wet grass. The dampness soaked into her clothes, chilling her to the bone. She crawled through the mud, through the perfectly manicured flower bed she had planted last spring. She reached the driveway. She waved her arm. Click! The floodlight blazed to life, a harsh white spotlight illuminating the scene. Across the street, Mrs. Miller was closing her blinds for the night. She paused. She saw something on the lawn across the road, a shape, a person. She squinted, then her hand flew to her mouth. The front door of the Miller house flew open seconds later. Mrs. Miller ran out barefoot, shouting for her husband. Robert, call 911. Oh my God, Sarah. Mrs. Miller knelt beside her in the wet grass. Sarah, can you hear me? Robert, hurry! Sarah looked up at her neighbour's face. It was twisted in horror. She tried to smile to say she was okay, but her body finally gave up. The adrenaline that had carried her up the stairs evaporated. He, Sarah whispered. He did this? Who? Who did this to you? Mrs. Miller was crying, stroking Sarah's hair back from her face. David, Sarah breathed. David. And then the darkness took her. But the silence of the suburbs was broken now. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder, piercing the quiet night. Blue and red lights began to bounce off the white siding of the colonial houses, turning the neighbourhood into a strobe-lit nightmare. The paramedics were efficient. They moved with practiced urgency. Female, mid-30s, blunt force trauma, multiple fractures, possible internal bleeding. BP is dropping. Let's move. She was lifted onto a gurney. An oxygen mask was placed over her face. The world became a blur of faces, lights and static radio chatter. Stay with us, Sarah. Stay with us. As the ambulance door slammed shut, cutting off the view of her home, the home that had become her tomb, Sarah drifted in a space between wakefulness and oblivion. Meanwhile, 100 miles away, a sleek black sedan was speeding down the interstate. David had stopped shaking. The panic had been replaced by a cold, hard resolve. He had tossed his bloody shirt into a dumpster behind a gas station 3 towns over. He had wiped the steering wheel. He turned on the radio. Soft jazz filled the car. He checked his reflection in the rearview mirror. He looked tired but composed. He picked up his phone. He dialed a number. "Hey," he said, his voice smooth, intimate. "I'm on my way. Yeah, got held up with some family drama. She took it badly, screaming the whole works, but it's done. I left. I'm coming to you." He paused, listening to the voice on the other end. "Yeah," he smiled. "Pack your bags. We're going to that resort. I need to get away. I need to forget about her." He hung up. He genuinely believed it was over. He believed that the broken woman in the basement would be a tragic accident, a fall down the stairs, or maybe a mystery for the police to fumble over. He believed he was smarter than the system. He didn't know that Sarah had crawled. He didn't know the Millers had heard her whisper his name. He didn't know that the ambulance speeding toward the trauma centre carried not a victim, but a witness. He drove on into the night towards his mistress and his vacation, leaving his old life bleeding out in the rearview mirror. But as he merged onto the highway that would take him to the coast, he didn't notice the traffic camera flashing above him. Flash! Recorded, time-stamped. The monster thought he was escaping, and in reality, he was just lengthening the leash before it snapped back. The ambulance arrived at St. Jude's Trauma Centre. The doors flew open. "We need a trauma bay now!" They wheeled her in. The bright fluorescent lights of the hospital corridor rushed by overhead. In her mind, Sarah was floating. She saw her boys. They were laughing, playing in a park she didn't recognise. She reached out to them. "I'm coming," she thought. "Mummy's coming." She wasn't dead. And as long as there was breath in her broken body, the war wasn't over. It had just moved to a new battlefield. From the basement to the courtroom, the monster had unleashed his rage. Now he was about to face the consequences, but first she had to survive the night. The heart monitor beeped steadily, a rhythmic, stubborn sound. Beep, beep, beep. It was the sound of defiance. The first thing she noticed was the white. It wasn't the soft, comforting white of a cloud or fresh linen. It was a harsh, clinical white. The ceiling tiles were white, the sheets were white, the bandage wrapped heavily around her chest was white. The second thing was the sound, the rhythmic, persistent beep, beep, beep of the cardiac monitor. It was the soundtrack of survival. Sarah tried to move, but her body refused to obey. It felt as though she were encased in lead. A dull, throbbing ache radiated from her ribs, pulsing in time with the machine next to her bed. Her left arm was immobilized in a cast, elevated on a pillow. "She's waking up." The voice was soft, familiar. Her mother. Sarah forced her eyes open. The light stung. Through the blur, she saw her mother's face hovering above her, etched with days of worry that had deepened the lines around her eyes. And behind her, standing like a sentinel in a beige trench coat, was Miller, the private investigator. "Mum," Sarah croaked. Her throat felt like it was filled with broken glass. "I'm here, baby, I'm here." Her mother's hand, cool and trembling, brushed the hair from Sarah's forehead. "You're safe. You're at St. Jude S. You've been in and out of consciousness for 5 days. 5 days. The memory of the basement came rushing back like a tidal wave. The cold concrete, the smell of damp earth, the golf club rising and falling, the look in David's eyes, not anger, but a terrifying, empty resolve to erase her. "The boys," Sarah whispered, panic spiking her heart rate, causing the monitor to beep faster. "They are safe," her mother soothed. "They are with my sister in Vermont, far away from here. They don't know anything yet." Sarah exhaled, the pain in her ribs flaring sharp and hot. "David, where is David?" The room went silent. Her mother exchanged a dark look with Miller. Miller stepped forward. He looked tired, but his eyes were hard, flinty. He pulled a manila folder from under his arm. "Mrs. Reynolds," Miller said, his voice low, "we need to show you something. It's going to be hard to see, but you need to know exactly who you are dealing with." He opened the folder and placed a photograph on the rolling table that hovered over her bed. It was a glossy 8x10 print. It showed a beach, white sand, turquoise water, palm trees swaying in a breeze she couldn't feel. In the centre of the frame, Lying on a lounge chair was a man wearing sunglasses and holding a tropical drink with a little umbrella in it. He was smiling. He looked relaxed. He looked like a man without a care in the world. Next to him, rubbing sunscreen on his arm, was Jessica. This was taken yesterday, Miller said, in Cabo San Lucas. He flew out 3 hours after he left you bleeding on your front lawn. Sarah stared at the photo. The man who had broken her ribs, who had left her for dead, was currently working on his tan. He hadn't fled into hiding. He hadn't been consumed by guilt. He had gone on vacation. It was a level of psychopathy that defied comprehension. He was so confident that she would die or stay silent, or that he was simply untouchable, that he hadn't even cancelled his reservations. The tears Sarah expected didn't come. The sadness that had weighed her down for years, the mourning for her marriage, the desperate desire to be loved, evaporated in that sterile hospital room. In its place, a cold, hard diamond of rage formed in her chest. "He thinks I'm dead," Sarah asked. "He thinks you're handled," Miller corrected. "He hasn't checked the news. He's been offline. He thinks he'll come back in a week, act surprised, maybe play the grieving widower if things went south, or the long-suffering husband of a clumsy, unstable wife." Sarah looked at the monitor. "Beep, beep, beep." "He's wrong," she said. The door to the room opened and a tall woman in a dark suit walked in. She had a badge clipped to her belt. Detective Vance. "Mrs. Reynolds," the detective said, nodding respectfully. "I'm sorry to disturb you, but we have enough for the warrant. We just need your statement to seal it. Are you up for this?" Sarah looked at the ceiling, then at the photo of the vacationing monster, and finally at the detective. "I'm up for it," she said. "I want to tell you everything." For the next hour, Sarah spoke. She recounted the gaslighting, the emotional abuse, the tracking, the hotel confrontation, and finally the basement. She described the weight of the golf club. She described the words he whispered before he swung. "I can't let you ruin me." Detective Vance took notes, her pen moving rapidly. The recording device on the table captured every rasping breath, every pause. "This is attempted murder in the first degree," Vance said, closing her notebook. "Aggravated assault, domestic battery, plus with the financial records, Mr. Miller provided. We're looking at fraud and embezzlement from his firm too. He used company funds for the trip." "When do we get him?" Sarah asked. "He lands at JFK tomorrow night," Miller said, checking his watch. "Flight 402 from Mexico will be the welcoming committee." "I want to be there," Sarah said. "Sarah, no," her mother protested. "You can't even walk." "I don't need to be there physically," Sarah said, her eyes burning with a new intensity. "But I want him to know it was me. I want him to know that the boring housewife he tried to kill is the one who ended him." The following night, the international arrivals terminal at JFK Airport was a chaotic sea of travellers. Families hugged, drivers held up signs, and tourists navigated luggage carts. David walked through the sliding glass doors looking bronzed and refreshed. He wore a linen shirt and expensive sunglasses, pushing a cart with 2 large suitcases. Jessica walked beside him, looking nervous, checking her phone. "Relax," David was saying, guiding her toward the exit. "I told you, it's fine. I haven't heard a peep. If there was a problem, my lawyer would have called. She's probably sulking at her mother's house, too embarrassed to say anything." He felt invincible. The tequila and the sun had washed away the memory of the basement. In his mind, the violence was just a bad dream, a necessary correction to a messy situation. He was David Reynolds. He always landed on his feet. He stepped out onto the curbside pickup area, scanning for his Uber. "Mr. Reynolds?" A voice cut through the noise of the traffic. David turned. 2 uniformed officers and a woman in a suit, Detective Vance, were blocking his path. "Yes," David said, flashing his charming corporate smile. "Is there a problem, officers?" "A parking violation." "David Reynolds," Vance said, her voice carrying over the crowd. "You are under arrest for the attempted murder of Sarah Reynolds." The smile didn't just fade, it shattered. "What?" He laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "That's ridiculous. My wife had an accident. I've been on vacation. This is a misunderstanding." "Turn around and place your hands behind your back," an officer barked, stepping forward. "Jessica!" David turned to his mistress, panic finally setting in. "Call the lawyer, tell them." But Jessica was backing away. She saw the handcuffs coming out. She saw the seriousness in the detective's eyes. "I didn't know," Jessica stammered to the police, holding her hands up. "I swear I didn't know anything about this. He told me they were separated." "You can explain that to the district attorney," Vance said. The officers grabbed David. He struggled, dropping his sunglasses. "You can't do this. Do you know who I am? I have a meeting tomorrow. I have a merger." "You have a date with a holding cell," Vance said. As they slammed him against the hood of the patrol car to cuff him, David looked up, and across the street, parked in the loading zone, was a black SUV with tinted windows. The back window rolled down halfway. Sitting there, propped up by pillows, her arm in a sling, was Sarah. Their eyes met across the lanes of traffic. David froze. He stopped struggling. He looked at her, the woman he had left for dead, the ghost from the basement. She wasn't crying. She wasn't screaming. She simply raised her good hand and gave a small, cold wave. Goodbye. The officer shoved David into the back of the cruiser. The door slammed shut, sealing him in a cage of wire mesh and hard plastic. The golden cage he had built for her was gone. Now he was heading for a real one. 1 year later, the courtroom was quiet. The air conditioning hummed, a stark contrast to the stifling heat of the summer day outside. Sarah sat in the front row. She wasn't wearing the drab suburban clothes David had preferred. She wore a sharp navy blazer and tailored trousers. Her hair was cut in a sleek bob. She looked like the woman she was before she met him, only stronger, harder. David sat at the defense table. He looked small. The prison orange washed him out. His tan was long gone, replaced by the pallor of a man who hadn't seen the sun in 12 months. He had aged 10 years. The judge adjusted his glasses and looked down at the paperwork. Mr. Reynolds, the judge said, in light of the overwhelming evidence, the forensic report, the video surveillance, the testimony of the victim, and the financial records, the jury has found you guilty on all counts. David didn't look up. He stared at the table. I am sentencing you to 25 years without the possibility of parole, the judge continued. You betrayed the sacred trust of marriage in the most violent way possible. You are a danger to society. The gavel banged, a sharp wooden crack that signalled the end. Sarah let out a breath she felt she'd been holding for a year. It was over. As the bailiffs hauled David away, he turned to look at the gallery. He scanned the faces, looking for what? Sympathy? Jessica? Jessica wasn't there. She had testified against him in exchange for immunity. She had moved to another state. David's eyes found Sarah. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to speak, to manipulate, to gaslight one last time. Sarah didn't look away. She stared right through him as if he were made of glass. He was dragged out the side door. The chains on his ankles clinked. A different sound than the golf club, but a satisfying one nonetheless. Sarah stood up. Her ribs still ached when it rained. Her shoulder would never have full range of motion again. She had physical scars that mapped the geography of her survival. But she was free. She walked out of the courthouse and down the marble steps. The press was there, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. Mrs. Reynolds, how do you feel? Is it justice? She ignored them. She walked to the curb where her own car was waiting, not a minivan, a sleek sedan she had bought with her own money from the job she had reclaimed at a consulting firm in the city. Miller was waiting by the car. He wasn't on the payroll anymore, but they had become friends. Good outcome, Miller said, opening the door for her. The best, Sarah said. What now? He asked. Sarah looked up at the sky. It was a brilliant, cloudless blue, the kind of sky that promised infinite possibilities. Now, she smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. Now I go pick up my boys from soccer practice, and then we order pizza and we eat it in the living room because we can. She got into the car. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. The shadows under her eyes were gone. The fear was gone. She started the engine. She merged into the traffic, just one of millions of people moving through the city. She wasn't a victim. She wasn't a survivor. She was just Sarah. And for the first time in a long time, the silence in her life wasn't empty. It was peaceful.